Elections. Michael?
Good morning. Today is February 28, 2023. We're here to conduct a budget hearing for the Board of Elections. I know the Board of Elections plans on doing a PowerPoint, so we'll go to that, and then I'm sure the commissioners will have a few questions as well. Thanks, Ross and Dante.
Thank you, Mr. Matus. Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
Ross McDonald, Director at the Board of Elections.
Dante Lewis, Deputy Director.
Thank you for having us. We wanted to start off by stating Chairman Fellows and the rest of our board members send their best regards. Chairman Fellows did intend to attend this meeting here this morning, but he unfortunately had a prior engagement. So you'll get the two of us today. We have prepared a brief PowerPoint for the commissioners and for our budget director and the county administrator. So we want to start off by just talking about how nice it is to work together with our county commissioners for the purpose of conducting great elections here in Lake County. I want to highlight a few major recent projects that went very well for us. Of course, in 2021, the commissioners supported voting machine funding. Those new machines have been well received by the public. We're very happy with our new voting equipment. They've done a few things for us that we'll talk about later in our PowerPoint, but the new machines have really brought us into the 21st century on how to conduct elections securely by not having them connected to the internet, obviously, and efficiently. The voters have given us very positive feedback, and we could not have done that without our county commissioners. Our county commissioners also approved a poll worker rate increase to make us more competitive with nearby election jurisdictions. So obviously we're thankful for that, and so our workforce, which every election can be up to about 800 or 900 of Lake County's registered voters. We also are thankful for the collaboration that we felt when we helped design Suite 107 on the first floor. I know you, Jason Boyd, Administrator Boyd, he worked with myself and our former director, Jan Clare, at that time to make sure that the Board of Elections office was designed in a way that made the most sense for us. And so we're extremely grateful for that collaboration. And oh, I'm sorry if it's not. Now it is. There you go.
No,
Apologies about.
Scene one, take two. Start all over.
Yeah, shall I, or just keep going?
No, Mike, you're satisfied? You're adequate? Okay.
Thank you. We're going to talk about the 2020 general election. What a year that was for everybody, but especially those of us in elections. Our vote center design was applauded statewide and locally for safety and efficiency. And I have to shout out our Buildings and Grounds Department for that. That's headed up by Mark Iafalise and Lou Hall and their crew. Without their collaboration, their input, and their feedback, that operation could not have gone as well as it did. For the 2020 presidential election, Lake County was one of 8 counties to break that 80% threshold. So it was a historic election for us, and we did so well that the Ohio Secretary of State's office graded us with an A grade on that election. We've actually received an A grade every election since Secretary Frank LaRose has been in office. That was a new procedure that he implemented with his team in essentially providing election feedback post-election. And we're proud to say that we've received an A grade every election since he has implemented that. Mr. Lewis?
Well, one thing I could say coming to Lake County, coming up in elections, Lake County's always been the gold standard in the state of Ohio. Former Director Jan Clare and Ross did a fantastic job of building that, and it's my pleasure to walk into it. Just to cover some of our board members and staff, their accomplishments over the years. Chairman Dale H. Fellows actually was chosen as Republican Election Official of the Year by Secretary of State LaRose. He's served as an instructor in various election official education seminars. He just did one in January in Columbus. And after talking to board members across the state, they said he did a fantastic job in that course. He's also a new board member mentor. So when a new board member comes on, I believe he's got a gentleman from Trumbull County. He is that gentleman's mentor. So he looks to him, he calls him for advice. So Dale has been instrumental in elections in Ohio for the past 20 years. Director McDonald, it's been a pleasure to serve with him since I came up here in 21. He was selected as Volunteer of the Year by the Ohio Election Official Association. He taught a class down in Columbus, a registered election official training. Also a holder of both state and national certifications. He's been nationally certified and state certified with the Election Center. And Ross, also is a new director mentor. He's also a mentor to someone in his own office, being myself. So, myself, I hold a state certification through the Ohio Association of Election Officials. I am in progress to get my national certification through the Election Center. I'm on track. I've already been to conference. I've taken a couple classes. So in a short period of time, I will achieve that national certification. Also, local options. I have received calls all over the state dealing with local option information.
Thank you.
Tom Seymour, I think you're all familiar with him. He's our guardian to the counter. He actually taught a class down in Columbus. He's recognized by the state. We've sent him to other counties to give training to their election officials who have newly been hired. And they love Tom. Tom's getting questions all the time. He's state certified. Actually, all of our staff members are state certified, which means they undertook the classes down in Columbus to achieve that certification, with the exception of one who is 2 classes away from being certified. So in a very short period, we will have a whole office full of state certified election officials. 10 full-time employees. You'll see in the comparisons in the slides to come with counties of our size. We have the smallest number of full-time employees. That includes Ross and myself, that number 10. But to comparable counties, they are upwards of 14 to 19. The experience, we have over 164 combined years of experience. I was talking with Commissioner Plechnik before, and 15 years of experience seems to be the top tier of experience in Ohio. After going to several conferences and seeing the turnover throughout the state of Ohio, if you have 15 years, you're one of the senior election officials in the state when you look around the room. One thing I want to say, our staff members are extremely experienced. They've been around since the inception of our voter registration software. They know it in and out. That is something that cannot be taught in any college, in any trade school. That is just acquired knowledge I would put them up against anyone in the state with that voter registration software. They receive calls statewide. How do I do this? Me coming up as a young election official, I remember learning things calling Lake County. And from the voter registration department, the absentee department, from Jan Claire. So very much experience as far as that voter registration software. On the tabulation software, it's good to now have a counterpart that has allowed us to eliminate what we call project management from our vendor. We would do 2 days. We've now cut that back to 1 day just by having 2 people in the tab room that have experience. So that is an expense that's been cut. We've moved down to 1 day of project management. Moving on to the next bullet point, we have been selected to be the lead county for the Department of Defense UCOVID ballot transmission consortium. 13 plus counties in Lake County, out of 13 counties with the vendor that we use, Democracy Live, Lake County has been chosen as the leader. That means that federal grant dollars will be coming to the office in 2023 for administrative fees alone. Us being the lead, we actually will bring in money for being the lead county. That's projected anywhere from 30 to 40,000 is what our vendor had told us in the past. It's going to save us 10,000 a year. We pay 10,000 a year to our vendor Democracy Live for this UCAVA ballot transmission. So we'll be getting that 10 grand now through 2025. So that is a plus from this grant. Election night results, timely and accurate, as you've seen. I know there may be some people here that have paid close attention right when the results come in, and we've reported by 10 o'clock every night. That right there goes to show how well our trainers do. We have 3 individuals that head up the training, and you think about it, we have 700 people working just twice a year, and they're closing down all the machines, all the memory sticks are coming back, and we're reporting by 10 o'clock. I would have to put that up against anyone in the state. After the fact, 100% accuracy rate during our post-election audits. That's when we actually select random polling locations and we do a hand count. And we've received, we have not fallen short of 100% since Ross has been here. Am I correct, Ross?
That's correct, Dante.
Yeah.
Dante, I know that they're done by 10, but it still feels like forever.
I understand that, yeah.
Sure it does.
So.
That makes both of us.
I
Yeah.
appreciate it, though.
Yeah, it
That's
goes
good.
quick
Thank
for
you,
us. So, and then as I spoke about before, counties across the state constantly calling us, seeking advice. They look to their senior election officials. We have all those years of experience. That's one of the reasons why we were selected as the lead county for that UACAVA ballot transmission grant. Ross has been around, both of us have been around 12 years. Lake County was one of the first counties to use Democracy Live. And our absentee department has been excellent with administering that Democracy Live. So that, I do want to give a shout out to our absentee department. That's headed up by Amy Kistner, and she is very good with that program itself, that Democracy Live program.
And just to piggyback what Deputy Director Lewis has mentioned so far, we strongly believe that every one of our full-time employees who have been with us, say, greater than 4 or 5 years, every one of them could walk out of our office tomorrow and become a director or a deputy director pretty much anywhere in the state of Ohio. And so we are certainly blessed and fortunate to have this level of experience and to have the dedication to Lake County to remain here on our staff and not take opportunities that do come up from time to time. And those opportunities would be things like going to Cuyahoga County and working as a upper level manager, going to smaller election jurisdictions when there have been openings. There have been openings in the last 5 years in Ashtabula County and Geauga County, just to point out the border counties to Lake County. So we're grateful for our staff, and we are confident that they are leaders in their own right in their respective departments throughout the state of Ohio. I'm going to talk about the 2023 budget, and I'm going to start out with just some facts here real quick. On May 27, 2022, the Board of Elections had a board meeting. At that time, the director and deputy director presented the 2023 BOE budget to our board members. In that budget, there was a proposal that contained 5% increases across all salary-related line items. Commissioner, which was then nominee Commissioner Regovich, you were there at that meeting. You were there as an interested party to see us certify the primary election results.
Very
interested. Yeah, and so very interested. And so at that time, Commissioner Regovich heard our proposal, and from his experience at that time, he was the mayor of Willowick, and he knew he could feel the competition that had really exploded all of a sudden. All entities are competing against one another for talent, and organizations must be competitive with compensation. The board approved our 2023 budget proposal at that meeting, and then that afternoon we submitted our budget to the budget director, Mr. Matus, on May 27th, 2022, which was, I'll add, was a day late, by the way, and we received permission to be a day late because we had our board meeting on the 27th, and we wanted our board's support and buy-in with what we were presenting to the county commissioners. So moving ahead, We get to December 15th, 2022. We had a board meeting that day. At that time, we had already learned that the commissioners had awarded 2.5% for all salaries. Our board, in keeping with what we had proposed for our 2023 budget, decided to award an additional 2.5% via a board motion to all staff and the director as really a market adjustment. It was really a response to historically high inflation, and they awarded that 2.5% starting with the first pay of 2023. Other factors that played into the board's decision to do that was competition with the private sector and large election jurisdiction to our west and other election jurisdictions, frankly. We talk about this all the time, that being an election official is akin to being a project manager. You have a lot of various moving deadlines, you have a lot of moving parts, and so we know that our leaders, our staff members, could frankly walk out of our office and go take a job with a place like Progressive as a project manager. And they would be very well qualified in that regard to do so. We know that this year is going to be another challenging election year for us. We're going to be implementing probably the most monumental changes in Ohio election law in our state's history. As you may be aware, we're moving to a full, strict photo ID mechanism for voter ID in the state of Ohio. There have been changes to the way that we conduct absentee voting, and there are changes to the ways that we have to certify our results. We have to certify faster, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's a change for us, and it's going to put an additional strain on our staff. Another factor is that we are going to be walking right into the 2024 election cycle before you know it. It's going to be here before you know it. Right now, Representative Troy has a bill to set the presidential primaries to always occur in May, but there are no promises that that's going to happen. So we're planning as if the primary is going to be conducted in March, which means filing deadline for candidates will be in December of this year. So we're going to feel the 2024 election cycle. This could be the biggest and most competitive presidential election cycle we've ever seen. And of course, as we all know, how important Ohio is every single presidential year. At that same meeting on December 15th, the board adjusted our deputy director's salary proportionate to his election experience and what like-sized boards of election deputy directors earn annually. This was also understood as a condition of his employment, is that essentially you'll start out at a lower salary and we'll see how well you do, how well you fit in and get along, and the kind of value you offer to our organization in the board's eyes. And so the board did adjust his salary to a rate that is comparable to what other boards of elections deputy directors are earning annually. A similar approach was taken to me. I came here in 2015. I earned a certain salary. I got through a few elections. I did well enough, and thankfully I was retained, and they adjusted my salary while I was deputy director under Director Jan Clare. During that meeting, to make this tough decision to present our budget that way, our board compared the annual expenses from 2021, what we spent versus our like-sized county counterparts. And there are stark differences when you compare them. Lake County, BOE, with 162,000 registered voters, 10 full-time employees, our expenses totaled $1.39 million. And as a part of that expense report, what we were evaluating were not including voting machine funding, by the way. So we spent $1.39 million that year. Delaware County, with about 10,000 less registered voters, they have 18 full-time employees, and their expenses totaled $2.58 million. Mahoning County Board of Elections, 163,000 registered voters, so just about 1,000 more than us, 13 full-time employees, and their expenses totaled $2.12 million. And so what's, I guess, coincidental about those two counties, those are both of our former counties. That's where we came from. Those are the counties where we kind of cut our teeth on election administration, me being from Delaware County, Dante from Mahoning County. And So we like to compare ourselves to those other counties. We're both former athletes. We're a little bit competitive. And so we want to kind of always in some way beat our former counties. And it's always just a friendly rivalry. It's nothing too harsh. But we always like to look at them, obviously, because that's where we came from. But obviously, they're very similar sized in terms of their overall what we would call the customer base, which are our registered voters. So we broke that down on a per voter expense. In 2021, Lake County spent $8.58 per registered voter. Delaware County spent $16.97 per registered voter. And Mahoney County spent $13 per registered voter. Our next slide here, we wanted to talk about the chargebacks that our office has brought back. I don't know that we would call it brought back. We kind of debated on the terminology, but retained in the general fund. And this is a process that we are bound by law to do. Essentially what this means is that in odd years, we have to track our election expenses. So say the city of Willowick, they're going to be on the ballot this year. We have to track every expense that went into conducting the elections for Willowick, because in odd years, we are literally conducting elections on behalf of those subdivisions who need to have their elected officials reelected, who may need to propose levies that help operate their offices or their subdivision. And so we did a quick analysis back to 2019. In 2019, we had 3 elections that year. We retained about $425,000 in the general fund through the chargeback mechanism. 2021, you can see that was about $316,000. And then this year, we project about $340,000 to be retained in the county general fund. So for those 3 years alone, that's about a little over $1 million retained in the general fund. We'll give you a quick outlay of our grants that we've qualified and what those amounts were for. 2019, you can see $50,000. 2020, $250,000 plus. 2021, $40,000. 2022, $225,000. And then this year, we're looking at probably about $200,000+. Dante talked about the fact that we are receiving the administrative fees for the federal grant on the Uwakava Ballot Security Initiative. So that is a special award that we received just from being chosen. And then every county in the state of Ohio is going to receive some form of funding for electronic poll books. We know that we're going to receive about $151,000 for replacement costs towards new electronic poll books, which is a good segue into our next slide.
2023 and beyond. Electronic poll books, we are nearing the end of our life cycle. We first used the poll books that we have now in 2017. They were used in the general election. In 2018, knowing that technology is always changing and it is outdated very quickly in today's world, we put in a 5-year outlook of capital needs to the budget director, 4 iPads, possibly in 2022. 2021, 2022, commissioners budgeted $220,000 for BOE to assist with replacing our entire fleet of those electronic poll books. 2022 was a crazy year. We had 3 elections. It would have been difficult to implement. But in 2022, we were notified by the SOS and our vendor that the iPads were soon to be obsolete altogether. We have to be supported by the Apple platform, the Apple updates, and those particular tablets were no longer going to be supported by the current software version from Apple. Because it was such a hectic year, we had election after election, very difficult to implement. We opted to wait until 2023 to become free agents, to shop around, to purchase new poll books. We are now currently evaluating the poll book market. We are under the impression that the General Assembly may be partially funding these replacement costs. That was that $151,000 that we spoke about in the last slide. Yep. So we now are looking. We've talked to a poll book vendor known as No Ink. They provided us with a quote already. The sales rep that came in told us that these are the Cadillac of poll books. I know he's a salesman, but after seeing some of those features, we became very, very interested in that company. With that $151,000 going towards those the new poll books from the state, it looks like we would be on the hook for $289,000. That would come from the county. But Ross, we've both seen these, and they have some very new and innovative features that we didn't have on the old poll books. We were all very impressed. Our administrative assistant, who heads up the electronic poll book training and the maintenance of these, the programming, was very impressed. She's a poll book expert, Jennifer Heath, so she saw a lot of very great features with this No Ink company.
And I think one thing that impresses us about this new company that we're looking at is that they're made up of all former election officials, okay? So when you have a company that knows our lingo, that knows what we're up against, they've really designed this equipment to be the best it can be, frankly. The person who oversees the state of Ohio is a longtime former election director and former state election director under the Secretary of State's office. So this company really knows elections, but we look forward to continuing the e-poll book funding discussion at a different time. We're going to wrap it up. So again, we work together for our county. We work together to provide the greatest elections, I think, in the state of Ohio. Clean elections, honest elections, elections that are easy to participate in. The collaborative spirit of the commissioners' departments is appreciated. I have to shout out telecommunications department. They have helped us become compliant with security directives. I know that the IT department doesn't fall under your purview, but also the IT department, Lake County's IT department, has helped us become compliant with various cybersecurity directives. The commissioners passed a very generous and forward-thinking PEO leave policy for all employees under the Board of Commissioners. And so what that does for us is that basically you've already vetted that employee for us. You already have said, yeah, they can do certain tasks, they can pay attention to detail, and so we're going to put them out on election day having a sense of comfort that Jason or Mr. Matus have already evaluated that employee. Now, we know that there's room to grow this program to greater heights, and so we look forward to working with the commissioners and really trying to promote that PEO leave policy and having more people work on election day that work as also Lake County employees. So to leave, kind of to conclude our presentation, we know that conducting great elections comes at a great cost. However, the cost of conducting a bad election far outweighs that. It far outweighs the financial cost, and there are other costs involved when you run a bad elections that may not just be monetarily appreciated. So we know that it is an expensive endeavor. We feel that our office have been very responsible, especially when you compare ourselves to the other like-sized counties. And so we feel that we've created a business model starting all the way back with Jan Clare and that board, Chairman Fellows, and we've continued to perfect a blend of economic efficiency with quality customer service and election administration. So once again, we are very appreciative to have this moment here to highlight some of our expenses, to help you understand why our budget is the way it is for 2023, and we would be happy to answer any questions that the commissioners or the administrative employees would have of us.
I'll just kick off a little housekeeping. So can we have a copy of your PowerPoint presentation?
Absolutely.
Thank you. I'm going to say excellent job discussing the general fund and various grant funds. That's very much appreciated. While we're still talking about the electronic poll books, I see some discussion here, and I just want to be real clear on this. When we see in some of these communications we're sticking with the same vendor, we're getting a different vendor for the hardware, but the software running on it, is that the vendor we're staying with?
So great question. We are still, as as we kind of mentioned, I would call us a free agent right now. If we do change vendors, it would be a wholesale change.
Okay, I just want to be real clear on that.
Yes, sir.
So going back, again, we've got an increase for the full-time employees, and we were looking at basically 5% typical. We did have one outlier, but that's okay. Well deserved. I'll go on record as saying that. But the increased cost being 20 to 40,000, and that's again depending upon that overtime. I do believe they're all eligible for that.
Yes, sir.
Obviously we're gonna have to take a look at that. I would say though, just a little more communication in the future. I think there was just a genuine misunderstanding. I don't think there was anything nefarious that went on, or nobody was just looking the other way, or there were no side deals. That rumors seem to travel faster than truth these days. So I just want to get that as part of the record.
Yes, Commissioner.
But that does need to be looked to in the future.
Yes, Commissioner.
We're looking at 2024. If I could just put a number to it, though, we're looking at approximately $1 million. That is the reality of what we're looking at. We did have increased wages for the poll workers in 2022. That was very much necessary, and I think there was a lot of calisthenics. You might want to give a little background on the, help me out with this, the PERS component. I know there was a lot there, Mike. I don't know if you want to add, but I know you guys were all, there was the thresholds for that, and the dollar amounts, and the holdbacks, and the accounting associated with it.
There definitely, I worked with Mr. Lewis and Mr. McDonald with that. Over a certain threshold, they become an employee with that, and they have to have PERS withholdings as well. And a lot more paperwork does get filled out with that. They have to be an employee, then they have to term them after every time. So it was determined at that point in time, and there's statutory limits of what it is currently. I know that they're still looking at that for the future, but like I said, we wanted to stay under that threshold to be within the legal with all the legal ramifications of that. Anything else that you guys have?
No, I think that perfectly summarizes it. We tried to find a number that was appreciable for the poll worker while also tipping us over the edge of having to put every single poll worker onto PERS. What I call onto PERS. That's basically hiring them. So we do have a small number of poll workers that, because of their position, could, if we had 3 elections in a year, have to be put on the payroll. But that's less than 80 or 90 of them out of the 700. For the most part, for the most part, they won't hit the threshold, which I believe Mr. Matus is 600 in a year. So.
Gotcha. And thank you for that clarification. And as you know, I'm big on monitoring unfunded mandates. And we've been internally looking at a $1 million set aside for anticipated expenses. I'm sure the public, when they hear that, $1 million to run an election, their jaws are dropping. But the reality is,
Mr. President.
I have to ask this question, is that enough? You're up next. What do you got?
Well, I just want to even point out that's $1 million on top of what we already have budgeted. That's in excess of.
Yep.
So just for the record, that's what it
clarification.
costs to put on an election.
Yep.
Is that going to be enough?
It's yet to be seen.
Now's the time to enter it into the conversation.
Yeah, I think if you're asking $1 million on top of the 2023 budget, is that basically what?
Fat math, and I'm looking at Mr. Matus, I think that's fair, that we need to have managed expectations.
That BOE, it's one of the hardest departments to project out with the unfunded mandates that just come up at the stroke of a pen by the Secretary of State. The $1 million is just based on past practices. I know I've talked to Mr. McDonald at length about that, and I don't think we know. That's our best guess right now. Just from past practices, it could be 900,000, it could be 1.5, depending on whatever the Secretary of State does, their directives with that. When they did the last presidential election, there was a lot of stuff that they put into play that we never thought about before of being funded before with that. So the 1 million is just basically throwing a dart up against a dartboard with past practices. I think until the directives come out and so forth, I think that's the number I plan on for 2024, but it remains to be determined.
I would wholeheartedly agree with that. We are a very hard department to define budgetarily. And again, it's because we have oversight from several different layers. You know, we have our board members, we have the Secretary of State, and to a lesser extent, we have even the federal government in some ways. So on top of that, right now, we have a new set of election laws that I would imagine will be challenged in a court of law. So right now we're feeling the cost of having to throw away outdated envelopes or different written documentation that is no longer current with the current election laws. Now, a worst case scenario is that we spend a bunch of money to update our documents to the new election laws, but then a judge puts the new election laws on a stay, and then we have to revert back. So we're being careful about how much we throw away. We do have a contingency pile of old law documentation that we could whip out if we need it. So, but as Mr. Matus points out, it's a very fluid industry. And especially now that we have really taken a keen interest in cybersecurity, rightfully so. Cybersecurity is a very expensive endeavor because you have software and you have hardware involved. But overall, what we commit to the Board of Commissioners is finding ways to save as much money while conducting what will be a very costly election. And things that we do, as you've seen, is seek out grants that aren't just offered to us naturally. We go above and beyond in trying to find ways to save money for this county.
No, that's good to hear, and this is a perfect example of why this board invested in a facility for you rather than renting, adding capacity.
Yeah.
You need the space. There's just no two ways around it. You can't be squeezed for room to put things. This is the part, though, where I have to say no decisions will be made until all budget meetings are completed. Always got to get that commercial in there.
Yep.
Okay.
Keeps the prosecutor's office happy, and Mr. Matus for that point. Again, you're doing an amazing job down there. We truly appreciate that.
Thank you.
Is anything you want to add to the conversation?
Mr. President,
Sir.
I would just say, per your comment, I would really value a copy of this presentation, and if you could forward one to our clerk and assistant clerk as well. I just want to make sure that we have this information at our fingertips, because there's a lot of things that are going to be coming up that are relevant to it, and we may have to refer back.
Sure, absolutely, Commissioners.
Commissioners, the deputy director and director provided a copy to Mike and I digitally, so we'll be sure to forward. If you guys don't
Thank
mind,
you,
we'll
Jason.
forward it right
Yeah,
along
Jason.
Yeah.
to the commissioners and the clerk. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. President.
Sir.
So I like that presentation because it shows how well you guys are doing on the cost per vote. That stands out, so kudos to you and your team.
Thank you.
That's fantastic. And I can tell you from personal experience, I've gotten any information, anything, how to do things from your office. I think I'd love to take one of Tom's classes.
Yeah.
But
Have your treasurer do it.
but I appreciate all you do. And I don't think people realize that, I had to laugh when you said 700 people twice a year.
Yeah.
And that's a circus. That's an organized circus.
Yep.
And you have to gear up for that. You have to power down from that. You have to, again, great job. So we talked about poll books. Is that the same as touchpads?
Yes.
Yes.
So
That's
the poll
correct.
books at 200, those are, you have to change those, right? What's the life cycle of something like that?
So about 5 years. So if you kind of think about it, even just like a consumer iPad,
Yep.
probably most people, maybe, I don't know, but our current iPads are iPad minis, and we got them in 2017. And at this point, corporate industry is going to do what they're going to do, but they're no longer supporting security patches for our current iPad mini 2s. And so, given how sensitive the election environment is, that is the key reason why we have to upgrade to a new iPad. So we hope that this new iteration that we purchase, ideally here in 2023, that would get us to 2028, 2029, if we're, what we can tell you is that We mentioned already that our staff does a great job of maintaining them. The iPads work beautifully as they are. It's just that there is a vulnerability there if Apple is no longer updating them with new firmware versions or software versions. And so they are now kind of out of compliance in terms of the security side of things. So it's another one of those unfunded mandates. And when we move to electronic poll books and elections, I think all of us were kind of aware of the fact that this was not going to save us money. All that electronic poll books do is increase accuracy for balloting and reduce wait times for the voters. But at the end of the day, we work for the voters. And so
Right.
I think it's overall money well spent, but it is an extremely expensive piece of equipment.
Technology never costs less as you go forward.
Exactly, and we are what we call, not to use a sports analogy, but Lake County is like a mid-major. You know, we're not Ohio State, but we're right there with the Akron Zips or the Bowling Greens of the world in terms of, you know, major size election jurisdiction. So we have a pretty large fleet of iPads, about 240 of them. And so with them, it's not just the iPad. There's a stand that they sit inside of that is expensive, and then you have the carrying case, and then you have the printer that goes along with it. So there are a lot of expenses in elections, but as we mentioned, sometimes it costs a little bit of money to run great elections. I think like we do here in Lake County.
And when you have your new regulation about license or ID, will you have to get scanners for those then, or
The beauty of that, Commissioner Regovich, is that the iPad camera itself actually has a way to read those barcodes on the state ID. It confirms that it basically that it is the person who they say it belongs to. It automatically accesses that voter's record. So think about the days of the paper signature book. They were flipping through, and maybe you got in the wrong line, and they're sending you to the other line. But now the beauty is that our voters in Lake County, they just need to know what is their assigned polling location, get in the doors of the polling location, and then find the shortest line, show your photo ID, and away you go.
so that would take care of it too.
Yeah,
Good.
yeah, absolutely, yep. And what we hope to do as an aside is to come in, you know, bring in these vendors for another day of show and tell, and reach out to the commissioners so you all can have a look at that as well.
Great. You good?
I'm good. Thanks for all you do again.
Yep. Thank you all.
In our packet, though, you did give us a copy, the amended substitute House Bill 45 reimbursement examples. Did you want to take a second and just walk us through that? We got a few minutes. Do you mind?
I don't have that documentation
Oh.
in front of me, but off the top of
Okay.
my head,
Okay.
as far as what I know is that either, basically, is it in this packet? I'm sorry, Mike. Yeah, so, let me get to that here. Exactly. So essentially what I understand is occurring right now is that the Secretary of State has directed all electronic poll book vendors that operate in our state to submit their best pricing to the Department of Administrative Services. So at that point, boards will have basically like a menu to pick from. That collaborative purchasing usually drives costs down, which is a good thing for the taxpayers and for us. We won't have any eligible reimbursement cost because we haven't made that purchase since 2017. So we are going to receive straight up funding to the tune of about $151,000 that will then come off of the overall bill of what we'll owe our chosen vendor for electronic poll book funding. So if there's a difference at that point, a remaining balance, that's where we'll need to collaborate with the commissioners. Ideally, we could talk about flexible financing options, perhaps. I know that Budget Director Matus has different opinions on how to do some of those things, and we would lean on his expertise on what is a good mechanism in terms of maybe a 5-year payoff plan, or does it make sense to just go ahead and pay all of it in the same year? So that's kind of what I would have to say about that, Commissioner.
And then just so anybody who has an interest, this example was primarily more back when you were thinking about possibly replacing the units that needed to be replaced and maybe retaining some.
Yep.
A little bit like taking the standard deduction on your taxes rather than the itemized calling everything out,
Long form.
long form.
Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to keep things in context.
Yep, and so we really, the commissioners had graciously budgeted about $220,000 last year for this cost. However, we had an unprecedented election cycle. We had 3 countywide elections in 1 year, which had never happened to us. And that really, an election cycle is about a 120-day cycle, believe it or not. It starts 90 days before the election and then goes about 30 days after the election. And so when you count up 3 elections, that's pretty much the entire year for us. Because after every one of those elections, we have to do those hand-counted audits, which, again, we're proud to say 100% accuracy, but they take time. It's a manual process. Dante and I sitting on one side of the table, a Democrat and a Republican on the other side, and we have tally sheets and pens, and they're calling out the vote ballot by ballot by ballot for a select number of precincts. So that really ate up our ability to explore our current vendor and evaluate other vendors. We've had a mostly I would characterize it as a mostly positive experience with our current vendor, but there are certain things that we pointed out to our current vendor that we didn't see a lot of growth on, to be frank. And so those are critical areas for us, and I don't know that we felt that they met that expectation lately. So we're taking a look at other options. Deputy Director?
Yeah, with the new vendor, you can tell that it was designed by election officials or former election officials, or they've taken feedback from the counties that they service.
Yep.
So that would be the difference between the 2 vendors.
There's a clear pedigree there. You can just see it.
You can tell that it's designed in a way that makes a lot of sense for poll workers. And at the end of the day, the operators of these devices are the poll workers. Obviously, we have an administrative task involved with that, but the poll workers have to be able to operate the application on that iPad.
Spending 13-hour days with those iPads.
And by the way, just to let everybody know, we have no plans of implementing new iPads or new EPBs prior to the May 2nd special elections. And while we have you, there are special elections throughout Lake County on May 2nd. So take a look at the Board of Elections website. You have the certified questions and issues there to peruse. The big items, I would say, are the City of Willoughby does have an additional tax for public safety. The Willoughby East Lake School District has a renewal where they are combining 2 existing levies. I see a little bit of a...
Always.
They always kind of are on the ballot, but I, as a taxpayer in the district, I'll be voting on May 2nd or before. And then we have special elections in Madison Village, Leroy Township, and Kirtland Local School District. And there's a local option in Willowick, which is a Sunday sales, I believe, Don.
Yes,
Yep.
Sunday at the Willowick Cafe.
Yeah. So about 35% of the county is active on May 2nd.
Good commercial. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Matus?
Just in closing, I fully expect the 2024 budget to be probably the biggest budget the Board of Elections has ever had, just based on the prior history of the unfunded mandates that came up in 2020 and 2022. So like I said, just the board has to be aware of that because our carryover is limited to a certain amount of money.
Sure.
So that will actually have to come out of the carryover for the future. So I just want the commissioners to be aware of that. And like I said, $1 million is the best guess. I don't know if that's enough or not enough until we get into the unfunded mandate.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Thank you, Mr. Matus.
All right. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you,
Hearing is now
everyone.
concluded.
Thank you, everybody.